These are the thoughts of the author of this article. Using New York City as a case by which to study broad transformations in child protection ideology and local child welfare response, I find that in the 1930s, substitute care underwent a dramatic transformation, with many white children cared for in their own homes or in therapeutic institutions, while previously excluded black youth gained disproportionate access through race-matched foster care families. In 1943, the New York City mayor, Fiorello Guardia, declared that the worst mother was better than the best institution. And that was written in the New York Times in 1943. Now that says a lot. I'll be back. Hey everyone, welcome back, to those who came back, welcome. And to those who are regular viewers of our channel or videos, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody. Thank you. Let's get into this. I had planned to do a video on the American foster care system a while ago, but, things started coming and, I would always push it to the back. I could never find a good time to do the video. And then I also know someone who has worked in the foster care system for over 20 years. I plan to interview him to get his perspective and background on the system and, how children are treated, how different groups and ethnicities and races are treated and things of that nature. And then the video I just recently did on Fowler just brought it back to my memory on me wanting to talk about CPS. And personally, I feel that if you have the power to not have a child go in that system, you shouldn't let them go in that system. I don't care if you live in a studio. If you have the ability to take care of that child and you have the love and compassion and care in your heart, take that child in. You have no idea what these children are subjected to. Every single person who has abused a child, if I have the power or the authority, I will round you up and put you on a deserted island, and I wouldn't even reveal what I would do to you and have other people do to you. I would want you to go through the same thing you put that child through and worse. And I would never have mercy on you. Because I think anyone who abuses a child, an animal, an elderly person, or a handicap, a person who can't really defend themselves, I think you are the scum of the earth. Okay, let's get on to this article that I discovered. And of course, this article is going to be talking about the disparities in how children are treated based on their colors. And I want you guys to really get over it. Those who claim they have an issue with, they don't like racism and they don't like biasness. Okay, it's time to step up and show that. Instead of being afraid and running from hearing about racism and biasness, stop being afraid and stop running from it. It's time to deal with it. And those of you who believe that there is no such thing as racism, I'm not even talking to you. Kindly excuse yourself out of the equation. If you still believe there's no racism, I don't even know if you can be helped at this point. And I'm not talking to you. Like I said in the opening, in 1943, the mayor of New York declared that the worst mother was better than the best institution. I can agree with him to an extent, and then I can't, because the things I've heard that mothers do to their children, and the things I've heard that the foster care, what children have gone through in foster care. It's like, I don't know, because you have some really horrific mothers in this world, and you have some really horrific foster care parents. So I think the best thing for a child is to be really loved. Let's go on. As part of a ceremony commemorating the opening of a child care center for working mothers in Harlem, the statement marked the culmination of decades of advancement that endorsed the family as the best place to raise a child. This attitude echoed President Roosevelt's infamous 1909 White House Conference proclamation that the home should not be broken up for reasons of poverty. Only where child removal was necessary was the carefully selected foster home the best substitute for the natural home. These statements, nearly 3 decades apart, signaled the dramatic shift away from institutional care toward the preservation of family and home life. In this time, child protection underwent a massive rearrangement of services, with the fall of institutions, the rise of foster home care, and an overarching emphasis on family integrity. Yet, racial disparity quickly emerged in placement patterns, with white children lingering in institutional care while black children were disproportionately cared for in foster homes. Now, there was a question I saw on a white man post on TikTok, because some woman did a video talking about, she was asking, why did white people adopt or take in black children? The white man responded to it, and I'm going to add the clip to show you what he said.
Why do white people adopt black children?
I got a question. Why are there so many black children that need to be adopted? My second question is, why do you care who adopts them and what color they are, as long as they love that child and raise them right? And lastly, I see color.
Now, my response to him, if this video so ever crosses desk, there's a reason why a lot of black children end up in foster care and adopted. And most of the reasons are not fair. They are disproportionately sent to that system, and some didn't need to be put in that system, but they were put in that system. So when you want to ask the question, be prepared for the honest answer. Let's continue. Why, at the height of Jim Crow segregation and racial exclusion in child welfare, were black youth disproportionately incorporated into what was perceived as the best method of care? Historians suggest that the shift from institutional care to foster family care in the early 20th century was caused in part by changing ideas about the social development of children. Institutions often reserved for white ethnic children have been the main form of care for orphaned, homeless, and neglected children in the 1800s. In these regimented settings, hundreds and sometimes thousands of children were cared for under the same roof. They ate, learned, and slept communally. But as the pressure of urbanization and industrialism threatened family decline and children took on increasingly sentimental value, progressive era reformers began to argue that families, even if impoverished, were essential to the development of young children. Compensated foster family care emerged as a best approximation of family life and proved to be a more cost-effective solution to child protection. Yet scholars have overlooked the racial disparity that emerged in this shift from institutional to home-based care, and consequently the racial politics of this historical transformation. The implicit assumption is that as non-white youth began to enter substitute care, they simply became part of a pre-existing system of foster home care that had already come to overshadow institutional care. But this article argues that the changes in methods of care at this moment in history were much broader than a move away from institutions. Rather, they signal a shift in valuations of family along racial lines during the first half of the 20th century. Using archived data from the domestic relations courts and child placement agencies in New York City, this article argues that while the home undoubtedly became the best place for children, the concept came to mean something different for white and black youth. In a dramatic turnaround between the 1930s and 1960s, white New York City children were increasingly cared for in their own homes or therapeutic institutions, while previously excluded black youth gained disproportionate access to substitute care through race-matched foster families. In effect, home became the biological family for white youth, whereas the foster home became a solution to black child dependency. Now you have a more compound answer as to why black children are in foster care, or why so many black children are in foster care. It's always a disparity. Always. Let's go on. This article situates divergent return to the home in the emerging welfare state of the early 20th century. New Deal reformers credited the Social Security Act of 1935 with promoting the security of the American home and the protection of the family life of wage earners, creating a foundation upon which the welfare of American children rested. Yet racial inequality was woven into wage earner protections through the exclusion of agricultural and domestic workers. Though black reformers argued for greater shares of the New Deal benefits, it became clear that socioeconomic investment in black communities was not part of the New Deal plan, nor could local social workers be expected to solve the Negro problem, as black child dependency became a seemingly unresolvable crisis in the North. The substitute home emerged as a viable solution. I find that child welfare workers envision foster home placement with middle-class black families as a way to provide children with needed resources. In this way, official foster care systems emerged not as an extension of black kinship strategies, but as an experimental solution to black child dependency in the context of exclusion from the emerging welfare state. The obstacle faced in this early era set the stage for fiercely contested debates about the best place for children, given the perceived inability of the black community to care for their own. This historical case highlights critical questions about the direction of racial justice in child welfare and emphasizes the need for economic investment and redistribution in conjunction with cultural preservation strategies reliant on race matching. As Dorothy Roberts argues, the injuries sustained within foster care are not eliminated by care within one's own community. The disproportionate use of any form of foster care contributes to the loss of control over black family life. In fact, in subsequent decades, as exclusion gave way to over-inclusion, the conditions of poverty and distress in segregated communities necessitated a return to congregate care for hard-to-place minority youth, paralleling political discourse, and other historical arenas. The failures of race-matched foster home care affixed blame on black families for their failure to meet the needs of child dependency. The emergence of racially disparate foster care system is not solely rooted in the policing of black families, nor the coincident use of a new method of care. Rather, this study offers insight into a moment in history when valuations of the home diverged as a solution to white and black family poverty, setting the stage for racialized ideas about autonomy and responsibility for children's well-being. Yeah, you gotta wonder. Basically, the breakdown was what the paragraph said. They at the end, she was basically saying, what's her name? Roberts was basically saying at the end, why was there a need of the foster care system when all they had to do is increase the wages of impoverished families? You know what I'm saying? Instead of you taking a child out of the home because they were too poor to take care of their child, why didn't you just increase the wages? Because it was another system erected for control and also abuse. When you realize how corrupt this government is and how wicked these agencies are in this country and around the world, you would already have that answer. You really think they erect these foster care homes and systems because they really love these children? When you have someone's child and you have the authority over that person's child, you can do whatever you want. And then a child mind is, you can mold that mind into making them become whatever you want them to become. Okay, let's continue. The structural underpinnings of child welfare have long been shaped by the racial politics of public assistance. In early American history, here's the thing. This article is just making me think about a lot of things as I read it. Again, why did you have a need to erect the welfare system when all you had to do is increase wages? You see how they hoard the wealth in this country? Instead of you know how they throw it in your face telling you to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but then when you try to do that, they pay you with slave wages. Why don't you just increase the wages? Then people wouldn't need welfare. Why don't you have better job opportunities for everyone? Then people won't need the welfare system, including white Americans. It's all about control. I said in a few videos, if you take away someone's ability to feed themselves and put a roof over their head, you can get them to do damn near anything, dangling a little bit of change in their face. Let's go on. In early American history, the main way of protecting and caring for impoverished and neglected children was to separate them from their families and place them in institutions. In 1874, New York City banned direct aid that would assist families within their own home. This forced struggling parents to turn to publicly funded institutions for temporary child care during times of marital breakdown, job loss, or illness. A vast network of private religious institutions and foster agencies grew in this context, acting as a coercive arm of the underdeveloped welfare system. But racial politics also greatly informed their growth as Various religious denominations competed to lay claim to impoverished and immigrant white ethnic children as future citizens. Yet black youth were excluded from the perceived benefits of institutional care and largely relegated to a few underfunded color orphan asylums, as well as extended family and community resources. Those who fell through those safety nets were instead cared for in workhouses and jails alongside adults. Racial ideas about children's capacity for rehabilitation and social development greatly informed methods of care. This was an era defined by a certain relationship to the home, one in which children, particularly those of white ethnic immigrants, were best cared for in separate settings where they could be socialized according to American norms and behaviors. The value of placing both dependent and delinquent children outside the home has been reserved for white children in various historical moments where rehabilitation is valued. By the progressive era, the politics of public assistance began to shift, reflecting the rise of psychology as well as understanding of infant mortality and child development. The value of institutions came under fire. Reformers across the country began to fight for public assistance programs that would enable children to be cared for in their own homes. In 1915, New York City joined the rest of the country in implementing mothers' pensions, cash benefits originally aimed at worthy widows, but expanded to include all single mothers in 1924. But benefits were set at rates directly proportional to the cost of institutional care, rendering them too meager to provide adequate support. Furthermore, mothers' pensions were not far-reaching. By 1933, the majority, 87% of NYC pensions were granted only to widows. Nationwide statistics from 1931 showed that just 3% of mothers' pensions were awarded to black families. Black children were less likely to qualify for home-based care supported by mothers' pensions than the children of white mothers. While historical scholarship makes clear that institutions became outmoded as ideas about childhood and family changed, the structural underpinnings of the child welfare system were deeply shaped by the racial politics of public assistance. Mothers' pensions were a vital first step in the establishment of the home as the best place for children, but without an expansive social welfare system, orphanages continued to be a leading form of child care through the 1930s. It was not until the New Deal that the social safety net truly cemented the superiority of the biological family. Yet, as quickly as the natal home became the best place for children, with foster home care as a close second, racial placement patterns began to diverge. In order to understand why black youth were disproportionately incorporated into foster home care, it is critical to examine the politics of race, poverty, and family responsibility within the emerging welfare state. At the heart of the shift from institutions to foster family care was a change in the policy approach to family poverty. The black family has often been at the center of social policy aimed at eliminating poverty. As early as Reconstruction, programs like the Freedmen's Bureau worked to introduce former slaves of family responsibility, motivated foremost by a fear that former slaves, particularly women and children, were at risk of becoming public burdens. agents were authorized to perform marriages, dissolve informal unions, track down spouses, and otherwise police family relationships. Nearly a century later, the Des Moines report set off decades of research centering the black family as the root of intergenerational poverty. This concern with family value informs poverty policy, from fatherhood programs to marriage incentives to child support legislation. But the rise of a racially disproportionate foster care system offers a different perspective of how the black family has been imagined as a benevolent solution to structural poverty, segregation, and the lasting effects of discrimination. The emphasis on family as the root of poverty is part of what Melinda Cooper calls family responsibility. She argues that in America, there is a deeply rooted idea that the family, rather than the state, should serve as the primary source of economic security. In poor law tradition, this has meant that before a dependent person can become eligible for public benefits, it must be proven that no other relatives can shoulder the economic burden. This arrangement helps manage dependency by shifting the burden of risk, responsibility, and care to the family, a space where altruism as well as natural and legal obligations are presumed to guarantee self-sufficiency. But the Social Security Act of 1935 radically transformed the country's approach to poverty, shifting responsibility from the family to the state. Now here's the thing, let me ask something right quick. I don't believe that the state should take care of your family. I don't believe that, but I do believe that this country does have an obligation to take care of its citizens first. But I also believe that if these business owners and corporations paid their employees better, there wouldn't be this poverty. But then also you got to think about, where does poverty come from? Does it come from the lack of good paying jobs? Or does it come from poor decisions? You can have a job. You can be the working poor. Now, are you poor because you're not managing your funds right? Or are you poor because you're not being paid adequately? So it's a lot of moving pieces. And then I'm not even going to go into the spiritual part of it, of what poverty actually is. I'm just speaking on a natural level. There are so many things that can determine why a family is swimming in poverty or drowning in poverty. Let's continue. Reformers argue that the SSA could truthfully be described as a child welfare measure. After the SSA amendment in 1939, responsibility for both white male workers and their dependents was transferred to the state, as the spouses and minor dependents of covered workers became eligible for insurance benefit. The patchwork of old age and survivors insurance, workmen's compensation, railroad retirement benefits, unemployment insurance, and disability insurance help protect all eligible children against economic hazards which families face. Social insurance signaled a new approach to defining and addressing family poverty, from child separation to family preservation. But racial inequality was woven into the New Deal welfare state and, by extension, policies of family security. Because of occupational exclusions and rising unemployment rates, fewer African Americans in New York qualify for social insurance provisions. Instead, black families were increasingly channeled into public assistance programs, particularly Aid to Dependent Children, ADC, which offered cash benefits to impoverished single mothers. See what we talking about with disparities? They couldn't, black families couldn't qualify, or no, they were excluded. Black families were excluded from the social insurance provisions. So that only went to white families. So the black people had to rely on public assistance. Let's go on. By 1938, black children were nearly 1/4 of those assisted by ADC in New York. On its face, the direct cash benefits of ADC offered black families in the urban North a stake in family security. Not only were ADC payments comparable between white and black families in New York, ADC recipients could expect to earn slightly more than the predominantly white female recipients of survivor benefits, $46.52 and $43.87 respectively. Despite this parity, the channeling of black families away from social insurance and into public assistance left an indelible mark on family security. Social insurance benefits by themselves were not a solution to poverty, but they signaled a new relationship to the state. They offered predominantly white families a greater degree of economic security and freedom from family regulations. Because social insurance was not means tested, the vast majority of beneficiaries relied on other forms of income, including employment, public assistance, earnings from federal work programs, and assistance from private agencies. For white families on the verge of economic or personal crises, social insurance not only enabled them to avoid destitution, but offered possibilities for economic mobility. In contrast, recipients of assistance tended to rely exclusively on benefits due to eligibility requirements, resulting in lower overall incomes. Regulated to ADC, black women in particular came to be treated as dependent persons who required supervision and protection rather than as barriers of rights. Compared to white family security, families of color continue to be subject to a distinct form of governance surrounding issues of family responsibility, including being expected to track down absent husbands for assistance, establishing paternity, proving home suitability, and otherwise opening up their lives to state investigation. This article makes the case that the rise of foster care was rooted in the divergent nature of state support for the family. The shift from institutions to foster home care reflected a change in ideas about where children from impoverished families were best reared and what role government responsibility played in supporting the family. The following case captures how local officials crafted solutions to the social problem of black children dependency in the absence of state support. Ooh. I can't tell you how many times I've heard men talk about how black women destroy the family because they started relying on government assistance that pushed out the family or the black man or something like that. So I said, okay, I always ask this question. I never get an answer. So maybe somebody can answer this question for me. Finally, okay. Like I said, there are a lot of black men who have an issue with black women receiving government assistance. And basically, they say the root of the matter was to destroy the black family. And I can't even dispute that. I do believe it was enacted to come in and help destroy the black family. But here's my thing. Because the reason why I helped destroy it is because in order for a woman to get this assistance, the man couldn't be in the family, in the household. Okay. I asked the question, if this woman was at home taking care of your children that you helped create, that you planted your seed into her womb and helped bring on this earth, If she had no way of providing for those children because you weren't here, either you were in jail, running the streets, or anywhere but taking care of your family, what was she supposed to do? Is there any man that's going to step up and answer that question? What was this woman supposed to do? Was she supposed to get an Uber job? We talking about in the early days when, these programs were first. Was she supposed to go out there and sell her ass on a corner? What was she supposed to do? Go out there and prostitute herself? What was she supposed to do to keep from taking government aid to take care of your children too? But if you willingly walked your ass up out of that house and didn't bother to take care of that woman and your children, and you pissed off because she got government assistance, then, sir, you have an issue other than being angry with this black woman who did her best to make sure those children didn't starve, to make sure to keep a roof over their head. Ain't nowhere in the world you gonna tell me if I was at home, which I thank God I was never in that situation, Jesus. But if I was at home and had four of your children and didn't have a way to feed them, and I accepted government assistance, I wish you would come in my face telling me something. I wish you would, because I would have you running out that house with frying pans directed at the back of your head for coming in my face talking crazy, and I'm trying to take care of our children. You got the game twisted. I'm doing the best that I can, and you gonna get pissed off at me? Ooh, let's go on, because I'm feeling it. I'm feeling like I'm in that position. Let's go on. At a time when the dependents of white men enjoyed the benefits of federal initiatives of family integrity, black families face unyielding insecurity and an escalation of government intrusion into their private lives. And at this time, I would like to show you a clip of how they intruded into the lives of the black family, the government, when they gave you the little chump change to take care of you and your family. Remember that infamous scene in the movie Guardia, Diane Carroll? Let me play this clip, and this is fair use, YouTube. This is fair use. I'm using this clip to help paint the picture of how the government intruded in black families' lives after they gave them chump change. Here you go. I disabled the clip's audio. I forgot that I did that. But look at the clip. It's self-explanatory. The black folks had to hide their items because they had to come off like they were very broke, poverty-stricken. Having a toaster was a luxury. So it was like, you're broke. You're not supposed to have a toaster. You need to toast your bread on top of the stove in a frying pan. I was told at a dealership a couple of years ago, they said that they were having a lot of incentives for people buying vehicles. So I asked him about, if you were purchasing a luxury car, did they have incentives? He told me, if you're buying a luxury car, you don't need incentives. I was like, So back to my point about the video clip, black people had to run around the house like they even had the kids in on it. The kids had to be the lookout. Mom, here they come, and mom had to run around the house and make sure she looked as broke, busted, and disgusted as they needed her to look for a few change. Right in your face. Claudia depicted this movie right on point. Let's get back to our scheduled program. Now, those of you who think this was dramatical, it wasn't. Talk to someone that was getting aid in the 60s, a black family, a mother. Ask her what she had to do, how many hoops she had to jump through, and what she had to do just to get that little funky ass aid. Let's go on. To stem the tide of rising black family insecurity, child protection turned away from the biological home and instead toward the substitute home. The foster family was an alternative method of care that called for the retraction of public responsibility during a moment of expansive state support for family security. This case offers insight into how New York City actors, both conservative and liberal, mobilized the Black family to resolve the many consequences of state abandonment, segregation, poverty, and discrimination, with lasting implications for the development of child protection. In the 1930s, a multi-dimensional set of changes regarding how to best care for children occurred, including the declining willingness of the state to finance children's institutions, the developing significance of natal home, and growing economic contracts securing white families. This article traces what this meant on the ground for minority children in New York City. New York is an important case because it was and continues to be incredibly influential in the child welfare sphere. In 1933, it had the largest substitute care population, 50,921, comprising 17% of the national population. Statistics also show that the post-war decades were marked by a trend toward increasing proportions of non-white children in the public child welfare caseload. New York City offers insight into the impact national level policies had on the ground and, importantly, illuminates how social workers crafted solutions to child dependency in the wake of mass transformation in American social policy after the Depression. Now, I'm going to skip a couple of sections. That's a little too long, but I'm gonna had to clear. I'm not laughing at this article. I'm just laughing at how I just don't want to read all this. So I'm going to skip to this section called the Black Child Welfare Crises of 1910 to the 1930s. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna add the link to the article in this video so you guys can read away. Let's go on. The Black child welfare crises emerged as New York City made progress in broadly realigning child care methods to support the home. At the turn of the century, most children were cared for in large-scale institutions, but by the 1930s, the city succeeded in shifting to family-based care. But as methods changed, so too did the racial nature of substitute care. By 1917, almost 40% of children in out of home care were housed in institutions with populations that ranged from 101 to 400. And another third were in settings with 400 to 1,000. To manage such large populations, institutions routinized daily life and required conformity in clothing, haircuts, and speech. In 1960, New York State investigation found these institutions to be unfit for child development. Sleeping areas were overrun with vermin, methods of punishment were antiquated, and children were given little education outside of religious instruction. As a result, the Children's Home Bureau was established in 1917 to select children out of institutions and place them in foster homes of matching religion. But these initiatives were quickly reversed under the subsequent administration, and in 1918, the Bureau was discontinued. Reformist efforts were thwarted by religious factions in both the political and child welfare sphere. It was not until 1930s that New York showed significant gains in the shift of home-based care, reflecting nationwide initiatives to support the family. Child welfare advocates agreed that the first line of defense for children was in their own homes. But for those who still required out-of-home care, foster homes were a best approximation. By the mid-1930s, the Division of Child Welfare reported that the state had made a drastic shift away from institutional care. Between 1911 and 1935, the number of children in institutional settings decreased by 27% from 32,475 to 26,667. Meanwhile, remunerated foster home care increased by nearly 436%, from a population of 3,783 in 1911 to 20,286 in 1935. The dramatic increase in foster family care was not caused by the development of competing foster agencies. In fact, by the late 1930s, only a handful had been established, and rather a single foster care agency was able to handle thousands of cases, more than any one institution ever could or should. But as reformers celebrated the successful return to home-based care, Black child welfare was quickly becoming a crisis. The problem was rooted in the widespread unwillingness of long-standing child caring institutions to accept Black children. Children were legally required to be placed in agencies that aligned with their family's religious faith. Because most Black Americans were Protestants, the responsibility fell mainly to the Protestant institution. There was a deeply embedded sense that each religious group should take care of their own. In an environment where meals, classrooms, and even beds were shared, racial and religious cohesion appeared justified. Many agencies felt that the Negro group itself should assume some responsibility for handling Black children's care. I'm going to end it on that. Like I said, the link is going to be in the description. What I have to say about that is maybe more of the Black community would take care of their children if it wasn't so many hoops and things they had to go through, or hoops they had to jump through and things they had to go through to get more of those resources and funds that always seem to be available to others and not our community. And as we look at, let's just take a look at what was taking place the last 2-3 years in this country. See what I'm talking about? Where new folks that have no standing in this country, had no roots in this country, didn't work in this country, have no generations in this country, came over here literally getting thousands and tens of thousands of money just for showing up at the border. But when it comes to our communities, it's like, hey, niggers, we don't have nothing for you. Keep telling you that. Stop asking. Okay, so if you guys was able to pull money out of your ass to give to these newcomers who have no standing in this community, you could have done more for the Black community. After all, don't we all pay taxes? But it always seems that Black people always get less of the taxes they actually pay. But if Black people as a whole pay billions of dollars in taxes, they always seem to get like maybe 2% of that. Yeah. I'm about to shut this down, folks. And I can go on and on about this. Yeah, but I'm kind of a little exhausted today. But thank you guys for your support. Thank you, those who rocked and listened to the whole video. Appreciate you. Those who couldn't listen to the whole video now, maybe you might pick up, listen to the rest later. Appreciate you. Those who checked in and only listened to like 2 minutes of the video, God bless you. Other than that, I'm about to shut down the shop, and I will definitely see you guys back in another video. Take care.